If you had $200,000 in your bank account and you knew it wouldn't run out, who would you hire? Who is the person that could take the stuff off your to-do list that's driving you crazy? Who could do the things that make you mad, stress you out, you hate doing? Who could fix the problems where you're dropping the ball and you're not keeping up? Who's that person? Because if you had that person, it would be a game changer. And I promise you, that person exists. And could the reason you can't afford this person be because you're underpricing? In the interview you're about to watch, I'm talking with Luke. He interviews me. He has a business and a podcast in Australia. I link to his channel in the description. We talk about pricing, your ideal profit margin, what should it be, why the lawn mowing business is no longer a good business, how to expand into other more complicated services with higher margins, what I'm doing now, what I'm going to do next, and more. I took our interview and I condensed it. I broke it into chapters for you, so as you're watching this, if part of this video isn't interesting, you can jump forward to the next part that's relevant to you. I also added my thoughts at the end of several of the sections. I elaborate on what Luke and I are talking about. But first, we talk about the most miserable phase of building a business, 200,000 to 1.2 million, and what is the thing that will give you relief to help you get out of that part of the business?
So I want to start with this. You built a lawn care business to a big size. I don't know how big it is now. You built a service software business, Service Autopilot, to a massive size, and you sold that. And I listened to your stuff, and one of the things that you say, which is shocking to me, and let me know if I understand this correctly, is that the hardest time in business you still feel is somewhere between $200,000 and $1 million a year. Is that right?
Yeah. I would stretch it back to the starting of the business to the $1 million. But if you go from beginning a business to $1 million, 100%, like no question about it. In my opinion, I've done 5 businesses and I've worked with tons of other people. So yeah, based on my experience and based on all the people I know, I feel very strongly about that.
So my question is for you, do you feel, as a guy who's sold, and you sold for massive numbers, you might want to talk about that later. I'm scratching my own curiosity itch straight off the bat right here. I feel, and do you feel the same way, that small business owners are underrated? Because we praise these guys with massive, massive businesses and all that sort of stuff, and they're business geniuses. And there might be some guys out there who are actually really smart. They're just stuck and they're really good at running a business. Do you feel like that sometimes?
100%. You mean, do I feel that way about myself or other people?
No, other people.
About everybody. Other people, yeah, okay. That's why I thought you were saying 100%. In a lot of different ways. One of the examples I've given over the years, and this isn't quite what you're saying, but I think about the guy or gal in some little bitty town that's where their family's at. That's where they grew up. That's where they want to live. That's where they're going to build their business. And they can't figure out why their thing isn't going as good as somebody they watch on YouTube or somebody they read about in Inc. magazine. It's because they're in the wrong market. Like there's a million little examples like that. Or you've got all the skill, all the talent, but there's you just didn't get the same advantages or opportunities growing up. Maybe, somebody that now is worth $500 million, they might have grown up in a family where their whole life, their parents were modeling the building of wealth, and the things that they would talk about in their families led the people that have now built these big businesses to believe you can go for it. You can do whatever you want to do. Whereas there's a whole ton of other people like myself, and I don't know what your childhood was like, that never lived in a world where they thought their world and what could be possible could be huge and could be like everybody else's. It just didn't seem possible. And so it takes them 10 or 20 years to even get to a place where they start to believe it's possible. And by that time they're already 40 and, and it's getting harder and harder to, your energy's declining a bit. And you never turn into what you could have been. We could talk through 100 of scenarios like that. So there are a million awesome people in the trades and in small businesses that just have so much potential and intelligence. And, they just didn't necessarily make crazy amounts of money.
I love that because I feel like you do jump on the internet and you see someone on Instagram who's doing, they've got 100,000 followers, or somebody else is doing some stuff and they're talking about what they're earning, and it's almost off-putting. Instead of it being encouraging, it can be like, oh, I've been doing it for longer than and I didn't get there. But then I watch your content and I go, I actually feel like you're one of the most down-to-earth, successful people in that
That's nice to hear.
Financial sense.
That's good to hear, because that's exactly who I'd like to be. When
you're running a business, this feeling where you're stressed and there's like a tension and you're tense all the time, and sometimes you don't realize that you're tense until the dog does, the dog barks at something and you're like, shut up, it's all of a sudden your response is a little bit too strong. And so you had that tension going because everything's not quite fixed, it's not quite ready, and it's not quite done, and that's like that for a long time. Did you have a singular moment where a bunch of that just released? Like something happened and it was like, yes, that was the thing we were looking for. That was the success we were hoping for. And it's like, oh, and then you have that relief and that release of that tension.
In the software business, that moment happened pretty quickly after that story I told you about, where I went to work on Friday morning, came home Sunday night. Mm-hmm. We navigated over the next couple months, which fortunately were the off season for most of our clients. We navigated most of the issues. And that year, by the end of that year, that was 2013, that was the turning point where we knew this business was going to work. And we were things really started to improve in a very major way. So that was a huge relief. I wouldn't say that it relieved all my stresses, but it never does. If you own a business, the stresses they never all go away. But that was a huge one. In the lawn care business, I would probably guess it was somewhere around $1 million in revenue, maybe 800,000. I don't remember now. It's been a while, but I do remember. It's like, okay, it feels like this business has legs, and I've got somebody operationally that can help me run this business. And so that's where I think I felt the relief. I'm not as strong of an operational leader. I can kind of tell you, this is what we should be doing. This is what we should be looking at. But I despise the day-to-day management of things. It sucks all the joy out of my life. And so having those right people in place to help me with that stuff where I didn't have to do it, that was a big relief. I think that's a good way to put it. In every business I've done, it's sometimes less about the money. It's more about getting the stuff off my plate that I just hate doing, or I don't feel like I'm good at, or I constantly procrastinate it. Anytime I get that person and they're finally to a point, it's like, oh, it's now their thing and not my thing. That's always this big relief, big sense of relief.
The procrastination thing is one of the bigger ones for me, because I'm competent enough that I can get away with most things, but I really hate doing certain things. And then they keep getting neglected. And it gets to a point where you're like, you'd be better off paying some teenager out of school who doesn't really know what they're doing just to do it 50% right than not do it at all. And that's something, but that takes a leap of faith too, especially with leadership positions. I can imagine the time that you're trying to hire someone in that operations role, if you're not quite there financially, and I don't know exactly the story, but if you're not quite there and you think, oh, it makes sense, I've been reading Gino Wickman and he's telling me that I need this, what does he call it? Rocket fuel?
Integrator. Yeah,
if
you get exactly. An integrator, it's all fixed.
And you go, oh, I've got to get that person. And then you look up, how much do these people cost? And it's like, well, I need them to get the money, but I need the money to get them. And so, other than, selling feet pics, I don't know how else you fund these things,
There's a lot of those leaps in the business. It's another example of why I believe that after you get past $1 million, $2 million, you get to some number, you're not taking as many leaps. Especially when you get to 5 million, and it doesn't take getting to 5 million to get here. But I mean, if you think about it, you're making 400,000 a year. You're personally living. Maybe you're supporting a family. Who knows what the situation is? Now you need to hire somebody that maybe makes 60. Well, the 60 is coming straight out of your paycheck. There's no getting around it. It is. That's the only way you pay the 60. you have to be able to you have to be able to grow the business fast enough to replace that money that you just paid the person. You know, everybody listening knows how this works. That's a leap of faith. The belief is I'm going to be able to get freed up and now grow this thing fast enough. You have to keep taking those leaps. They go on for a long time. Then there comes to a place where you've got a business that's big enough where you need to hire a $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 person. Maybe you make less profit that year, but it doesn't affect your take home at all. You still make whatever you're making. And that in and of itself makes it so much easier. Because up until then, it's always a state of fear. I hire this person. What if they don't work out? What if I can't replace this income? What if I can't get it done and save up enough money before the off season? Like there's a million scenarios. And so, man, you nailed it. I mean, that's one of the really difficult things about those early days. And I remember all that. There are lots of bets. You're making lots of bets.
Because essentially what you're saying is like when the money doesn't go well, it's literally affecting what you eat for dinner. You know,
100%.
It's like, we were going to have something nice and now we're eating, a stale toast that we bought a week ago. And, like you're trying to make things work. But then I guess profit margin, especially if you have no intention to sell and you're still profitable, is only a number on paper, right? Like if you're just happy, let's say you have a season where it's not so good, but, last year it was 15% and this year it's 4%, but things are going to get better. You go, okay, well, but I still got paid. You
survive. Yep. It's unfortunate because it means the future of the business will be a little slower because you don't have the money to invest, but you didn't starve. You're not selling your truck. The kids are still getting their stuff, so you're okay, but you're right. Yeah.
I adamantly believe 200,000 to 1.2 is one of the worst times in business. And I have a video coming on this to help you navigate it. Most people think a big business is worse because they imagine the problems they have today will be magnified when the business is bigger. But I want you to imagine this. Imagine that I came to work for you and I did the stuff that you hate. I did the stuff you don't know how to do. I did the stuff you aren't good at. And I also did stuff for you and your business that you didn't even know you should be doing. How is that worse? How is that harder than having a small business where it's all on you and half of what you have to do is stuff you hate doing? If you had me or someone like me working for you, your life would be vastly better. It would be easier. So I encourage you to stop imagining the pain you feel today will be magnified as your business gets bigger. It's reduced. Because as you hire people, they deal with stuff for you. They fix things for you. They proactively do things for you. So the question is, how do you pay for these people so that you can make your life better? From all the businesses I've looked at over the years and the businesses that I've owned, there's a variety of ways you fix this. But one of the top items, arguably number one, is around pricing. Pricing allows you to build profit, and profit is cash in your bank, and cash in your bank is how you hire people to make your life better.
We all start out charging a price that we think is going to work, and then you realize this is not really working. And people do this math and they go, okay, let's say, I'm charging 25% less than what I should be. And they go 25%, 30%. What do I do? Because they do not believe that people will accept a price rise. And so they have this choice where they're like, they feel like they're going to lose their business either way because they're going to lose it in their mind because everyone's going to leave them when they do the price rise or they're going to run out of money.
Yeah.
And you talk about this a lot, right?
I think this is one of the fundamental problems. So I've got a lot more talking about this to come because I think it's the crux of most business problems. On that one, the way I think, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, so if you put yourself now with all your experience into the shoes of someone starting out, because it's often just confidence or it's being unsure about the situation. How would you tackle that where you've got to do not a 5% or even 10%, you've got to do a big price rise because you really realize you're stuffed up and you're not making money and you're about to throw the towel in and someone's calling saying, Jonathan, what do I do? What would you say to them?
I do it in a couple steps. So step number one, all future work I sell it at the right price. One thing that will happen by doing that is you'll gain some confidence that, hey, I can actually get this price. And so that's step one. Half this game here is frankly just confidence. The second thing I would do is, let's say you have 100 clients. I would call 10 on the phone and I'd take the price increase with 10. I wouldn't do 100. The reason I would do it that way, you could call them, you could email them, you could do however you want to do it. Calling, I think, is best, at least with a few, because what's going to happen is you're going to hear if there's any pushback, and then you'll be able to adjust your narrative for the next one. I'll tell you this, for the most part, when you do a price increase, it doesn't require a big explanation. I've learned on most things in business, the more I explain them, which I like facts and details, so I like to explain stuff. You watching my videos, they're long for a reason. I like to explain stuff. So I can over-explain something. I can oversell something to the client, and completely unnecessarily. And the over-explanation can cause you a lot of your problems, whereas the matter-of-fact approach can oftentimes just, like, this is how it is. I'll give you an example. Years and years and years ago, you might remember this, I used to talk about accepting credit cards. And everybody would be like, oh, you can't take credit cards. Nobody's going to pay with the credit card. Or they'd be like, well, how do I do that? And the thing we learned at our company when I first started selling it was I would over-explain it, why we're doing it, this whole thing. And then I finally just started saying, all I need is a credit card to set up service. That's it. I was done. And it's like, suddenly I had no problem getting credit cards anymore. And this is back in 2007. And like, just that little assumptive statement solved all my problems that over-explaining were creating. And so I would think about it a little bit that way when you're raising the price. If we often raise our pricing through a letter or an email, and if you do it that way, I do like to give an explanation, and the explanation is always about the client. We're raising the price. All the money is going to pay for more and more experienced people. It's all going to people, and it's all going to vendor price increases, like something of that sort. I'd clean up that language, but I love to give whys. I think giving whys are good, but there's also a time where you just do the assumptive thing and say, all I need is a credit card to start service. There's other times where you give a little bit of why, but you don't have to over-explain it too much. And so on the price increase, you can make a phone call and you can tell the client why you're having to take the price increase. And you can just tell them, you can, by saying it's all going to the team member, it's all going to vendor price increases, you're insinuating it's not going to a Ferrari that I'm about to buy, that kind of a thing. And so that's how I do it. And then what you'll find is you might get a little pushback or a little and ah. You'll get a little something, and you'll pick up on that, and you'll know that's a little point that you need to proactively address in your letter or email that goes out. Or if you call everybody to take the price increase, which I don't think is necessary, then you know what not to say or what to say. And I'd call it testing and walk through a few of these. You only need a few, and then you go out to everybody and take the price increase. I've spent a lot of time on price increases over the years because I've been really bad at it, and I've gotten better at it. I have been good at sometimes giving other people advice and bad at taking my own advice. And sometimes I'm bad at taking my advice because I'm running 20 different directions and we just don't get it done. We keep kicking it down the road. So I've made these very same mistakes. But between what I've done from price increases and what clients I've worked with have done, it is unbelievably rare that something goes bad. What you'll most likely encounter on a price increase is not a bunch of people walking out the door. What you'll most likely find is that you take a price increase that's too big with the market, like to the existing market, and it slows down your sales. So meaning your conversion used to be 50% on everybody that called in, you'd sell 50%. Now you're selling 30 and it's price. And so you have to overcome that. But that's what I generally see. It's not a cancellation or a bunch of people walking out the door.
Right. I find that there's a time cost to changing people that contractors don't. So from a client's perspective, that contractors don't take into account. Because if I say I'm doing the lawn for 50 and it needs to be done for 75, it's a huge increase, right? Well, $25 if it's once a month, making up some numbers, people go, well, if they can afford $25 a month, and they go, yeah, well, this guy's reliable and he rocks up, and he does a good enough job, and I'm just unsure about everybody else. Yep. That might be enough for them to just go, even though I don't like it, I'm just not going to move on, because it's a lot of effort to move on. And it's 100%. It's not like these people, the whole reason why they've gotten you is because they're time poor. So then for them to go and do more work is So that's a positive, but it doesn't mean it's not stressful to go and do price rises. It doesn't mean
it
it's
is
not
stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember you
I have
saying
seen so much data on this one, and not data. I mean, data from people I know that did it, not reading a book data. And I don't live in fear of it anymore because it doesn't go bad very often. If you're a terrible company with terrible service and they're just looking for a reason to cancel, it's going to go really bad. But that's generally not the case with people that are really thinking about their business and being mindful and want to do better. It's usually not the case.
Well, I was about to say, you did a video recently in the 5 for 50 where you said one of the biggest mistakes that you made was not raising price. And in fact, with Service Autopilot, you had in the back of your mind that you should raise price for a long, long time. And you didn't raise pricing. And when you sold, you realized that the company that you bought it raised prices immediately. And you realized that if you had done it, I mean, you should tell me, but how much more would you have earned if you had done that price rise?
For sure, 10 million. For sure.
That's nuts.
And that wasn't like a clickbait title. I think the title's something around I lost $10 million, and that's dead serious. And so I couldn't have done the price, the way valuations work and such. I couldn't have done the price increase like the day before we sold and got the extra. I would have needed to do the increase and it come kind of flow through our numbers and make our overall numbers of the business look better. And then we would have been valued on that. And so, yeah, I'm dead serious about that.
Yeah, that's nuts. That's like
what
people. That is what people are hoping. You know, they'll be like, give me 2. You know, like so many people would be like, if I could sell and retire with 2, it's probably not enough to retire on, but I'm gonna try. You know, I'd be happy with that. But 10 is insane. And
not
that's
only
US
that
dollars.
would have been all the money we would have made. That because when we sold the business, we also got to keep all the money of the business. So some amount of 7 figures additional money would have been sitting in the bank accounts as well that we could have extracted that we would have made. Because this is like one of the most important things to remember on a price increase. As long as you're not losing money and you're covering your overhead and breaking even, a price increase goes straight to the bottom line. So if you have 1,000 clients and you raise the price $1 on every client, that $1,000 is pure profit. There's no expense out of that money. It's pure profit. So price increases are the most profitable way to grow a business. You can't do them all the time, but I mean, think about that. So if I had done that price increase, it was pure profit. It would have made our company look more profitable. We would have made all those dollars. They would have sat in my bank account. I could have I didn't even count that money when I said the $10 million. I was talking pure valuation. And so, it's like, I'm glad that you remembered that one. And I hope it did resonate with people because I wanted it to resonate with people. That's a number that, I'd be happy to have that in my bank account.
Really?
yeah. Shocking, huh?
Not many people say that. Not many people go, $10 million. Nah, I don't want that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we got to remember, I mean, by the way, you're the first American on the podcast.
Really? Oh, cool. I'm happy to be the first American.
Well,
hopefully
actually,
I represent us well.
I think you're doing all right.
Right,
the $10 million in missed money's probably made people question, is this guy actually good now? That's a joke. I feel like with, it's funny that you look back on that in hindsight and you have both stories when you're like, oh, I should have raised it. Like, how come I didn't do it? And, oh, my goodness, I remember how stressful it was to raise it. And it's like have you seen Tangled, the Disney movie?
I haven't.
Oh,
my kids are older now, so I don't see any of that stuff anymore.
That was quite a few years ago. That one came out, but my kids love it. My kids are much younger, and there's this scene where Rapunzel, who's the main character, leaves the castle for the first time, and she's so excited to go and so terrified to go at the same time. It's just a funny moment. Anyone who watches it and has kids will know, and it's like that's what it's like in business. It's relatable, and that's why those videos we like and watch them, because it's like, yeah, that's exactly right. I was so excited to go. I'm so terrified of what's going to happen. I'm so excited to go, and but you've got both stories looking back. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yep. I'd put out there this idea of just test things. So we'll use the price increase again. So often we think I need to take a price increase. So I'm going to take a price increase to the whole base. Try it with 10 people. Try it with 5. You want to up the price for your new clients? Try selling it on the next 5 phone calls. Like, just think as much as you can in terms of test. tests and things of that sort, and it'll just give you so much confidence. You do have to be careful sometimes. Sometimes it'll go the wrong way. You'll do a test, and it just so happens the first 5 people you have problems with them, and you're like, well, this isn't going to work. In reality, it will work. Maybe you need to try it again. So periodically you want to retest things. But I believe in business, the more we test things, the more we gain confidence and to do whatever that thing is, or to go bigger with that thing. So that's one of the frameworks that I love for building a business.
This is one of the biggest problems I see in business. The reason I say you need to know your numbers in business is because when you understand your COGS, when you understand your per man hour rate and other rates that indicate how you're doing at producing the work, these numbers will tell you if you need to raise your prices or if you need to improve efficiency. And I'm not going into the understanding of these numbers or how to track them in this video. I'll do that elsewhere. But just know, when you hear someone say you have to know your numbers, this is an example of why. Understanding these numbers tells you, should I raise prices? Should I leave this market? Do I need to create more efficiency? If we can't fix any of those things, does our business model need to change? Do we need to leave the service? It tells you all of that. If your pricing is wrong, your profits are bad. You don't build cash, you don't grow. It's as simple as that. So many people wonder, what's wrong with my business? Is it my market? Am I doing something wrong? They just can't figure out what the issue is. Oftentimes it's as simple as they don't know. They don't have any money. They're not building cash. Of course, once you build cash, you have to know what to do with it. But the root of most problems is there isn't enough money in the business. I really like the mowing business. I'm switching gears on you. It has a few really key problems that if they were fixed, I would build the most gigantic mowing business I could possibly build. It has the potential to be a great business. It used to be a really great business for us. Let's talk about it.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit here, because another video you put out, which I don't have your experience, but I agree with this from what I've seen. You said that running a lawn mowing business is one of the worst businesses you could do. As a guy who runs a lawn mowing business, and it's people can perceive that as clickbait, like the $10 million you lost, but it's so true, because a little bit more rambling from me. One of the reasons why I love the content that you put out is a lot of that business content. Back in the day, there wasn't as much stuff on YouTube. Now you've got so many good creators making good business content. But the stuff that I saw a lot of, like I remember reading, for example, like the 4-Hour Work Week. And it was like, you get a viral, virtual assistant. You price your product with extreme, margins and this and that, whatever. And I was like, I love the philosophy, but the practical nature is that does not work in a service-based business. You can't have a, X amount markup on labor because no one will go for your service. You can with vitamins, and I can't outsource my admin because there's so many. You can to a degree, and we do to a degree, but you can't. At the end of the day, you need someone who's local, who actually knows what's going on, and there's more problem solving than just answering frequently asked questions, and it's really complicated. Yeah. And so back to the original question is you put out, like, this is one of the hardest business to run, and you're somebody who's run it. And how many? Well, tell me before you answer the question, how many staff do you have at City Turf, and then why do you think it's harder than software or product or anything else?
Yeah, I think we have. I don't run the business, but I think we have just under, like, right at 200. I'm pretty sure that's where we are at. Our actual employee count is probably a little bit down, even though the business grows, because we have cut back on it. So I think we might do 4 million in mowing now. I'm not sure what that number is. I've looked at it, but it's around that number. But we aren't really trying to grow that business, and we've reduced that business from where it used to be. And for the longest time, way back, I would have said mowing was an easier business in many ways than, say, trimming bushes or some of the other services. But a lot of what's complicated mowing over the years is the labor challenge, just finding people to do the work. It's just one of the single most difficult of all industries, in my opinion, to find people to do the work. And then in many markets, pair that with seasonality. So even when you can find people to do the work, you can't keep them year round, because if you do, you'll burn all your profits. And so it's just incredibly challenging. And I think the labor is what makes that's really the problem with the business. If we had a great labor pool, and we could have a seasonal labor pool, and the same people would come back every year, and we could get as many people as we needed, I would never say it's one of the worst businesses. It's predominantly that. The other reason why it's a challenging business in many cases is while you're battling all those problems, you're also battling the challenge that anybody who gets laid off, who wants to start their own business, that got pissed off at their boss yesterday and is now starting their own business, whatever the scenario is, can mow a lawn. They might already have a truck. They can borrow some equipment. They're now in the lawn business. And just like all of us, because they don't know what they're doing, they all underprice everything by a ton. They were previously making $22 an hour, and now they're like, if I could just make $30 an hour, life is golden. This is so much better. Well, I can't compete with that kind of stuff. And neither can you, and neither can most people. And so what happens is the pricing pressure in the market, because most people think this is a high school kid job. Like, this is easy. This is, no big deal. This shouldn't cost this much. And the buyer knows about what it should cost, because the prices are out there. Whereas in some services, people don't know what a thing should cost. They don't know they can't tell you what it's going to cost to take down a tree. They can't tell you what it's going to cost to grind a stump, but they know about what it's going to cost to mow a lawn, and it just creates all this price pressure. And so it makes it really hard for you to price in everything it takes to run a really good business. And that's why I think it's really a not so great business. I think you can still make money in it. I don't want to completely come across as you can't make money. You can. I still do $4 million a year in it. It's one of our lower margin services. It used to be one of our highest margin services, and you can still do it, but you have to be a really good operator to make a bunch of profit in mowing lawns. You have to be a really, really good operator. And most people aren't really good operators, or they're not really good operators yet. And so it's not a great business.
I don't think the mowing business is going to get better, which is really disappointing. But there's no magical solution coming, because the problem, as you have heard, and you probably know from your experience, it's a problem of finding people to do the work. I see nothing that's going to make that change. The only solution is something like robot mowers, and they have become so much better. I've been highly invested in this industry, hoping that we would eventually get to the day where they're good enough where you could deploy them in some major way. And again, they have become so much better, and they will get so much better. The problem is, and there's many problems, but as an example, the form factor of the mower has systemic problems that can't be fixed to solve enough problems with them that there'll be a perfect solution. As an example, a robot mower doesn't have an arm to pick up trash and move it out of the way. It doesn't have an arm to move branches out of the way. It can't move itself when it's stuck. It can't economically typically work out on small properties, because it's very hard to get the mower from one area of the property to another, or through the gate, or around the pool to this little bitty tiny spot of grass. There are so many little challenges of that sort that its form factor is a challenge. It will never be as pervasive and common and easy to implement as an individual behind a mower. But that doesn't mean it won't make a dent in the problem. It doesn't mean they won't work at a lot of properties. They already do. So it's a little bit of the solution, but it's not a full solution. And so when I think about the industry moving forward, I don't see the solution that's going to magically fix this. But here's what I love about mowing, and why it still might make sense. You can make money in it. I just think it's really hard to make money in it with a massive business. And to me, $10 million plus a year mowing lawns in one location or a couple locations, it's just such a difficult business, and the margins have come down. I don't love it anymore. I used to, but here we go. What I love about the business, it's the best gateway service. It's the best and easiest thing to sell to a homeowner that builds a relationship with the homeowner that allows you to get in the door to sell them other stuff. I love it for that reason. I continue to like mowing as a launching point for so many people to get into the industry. It's a very easy service to get started in business for yourself with. I also like it as a launching point to start a business, so you build up a base of clients so that you can sell them a more advanced service. We're talking about lawn mowing here, so fertilization, weed control, tree care, pest control, other services can be sold back into that very same client. So it makes for a great launching point. I personally believe the future of lawn mowing is a smaller, it's basically a lot of smaller guy in a truck type businesses, 1 or 2 truck businesses. It's been that way for a long time. I think it's going to stay that way. And I think there are some companies that built larger lawn mowing businesses like us who have essentially reached a place where they say, why is it worth it? We might stay in the business like we've stayed in the business, but we're going to keep the service offering smaller because we can't build it that big because we never know if we're going to have enough people to do the work year to year. And as a result, we're at risk of burning our reputation in the market, where if we don't have enough people one year and we have to let a lot of clients go, it's incredibly harmful for the brand. There's all kinds of other reasons why I think it's going to basically be a guy in a truck, a guy with a couple truck business, and that's about it. And for you, maybe all you want is a better life than that of having a job. You're never going to make crazy money. You're never going to get rich, but maybe you're perfectly happy having 1 or 2 trucks, mowing lawns, making a decent income, working for yourself. And that's what I think the mowing business will generally be. Now, in my case, we're not leaving the business. We're just capping the business. I still dream of the day when the lawn mowing business is one where I can deploy a ton of robots. I do believe that day will come. When? I don't even see a point in making a prediction.
Going to more complicated services, you can often increase your hourly rate, and then your profit margin goes with that. However, you have to train people on those services. And when you start getting into like pest and weed control, there's always the 80-20 rules where it's like, there's a couple of products that will sort out most of your problems, no worries. But then whenever it gets complicated, it's really complicated. It's almost like it's very basic or it's very complicated. There's very few that are in the middle. And to grow a business like that at scale, the amount of training you need to do, and this is what we found. So we only do package services now where we're pretty similar. Mowing is the backbone of it, but it's where we really make the money is we're doing fertilization, weed control, renovation, lawn renovations, things like that. But we now do probably 15 different services, and each staff member needs to know how to do that, which means the training is insane. Yeah. You have to spend all this time. So then you hire somebody and you spend a long time training them. They're going to forget stuff. They're going to drop the ball every now and then. And then they might just go, after all that training, I don't really, before we made any money off them, I don't like the job, see you later. Yeah. So my question for you is moving... Well, I mean, just talk on that subject. You've moved away from mowing. Are you doing the more technical stuff? How do you balance that? The simple stuff with the training, easy for people to steal your clients. Complicated stuff, less easy for people to, start their own business, but so much harder to run in certain aspects.
Yeah. There's, at the end of the day, to build these businesses and make strong profit, training kind of becomes the game. To a large degree. There's just no getting around it. It's pretty baffling. I don't necessarily experience this firsthand because I don't run the business, but I hear the stories. It's pretty baffling how and I remember this from back when I was very involved in the business. You hire somebody that's been working at another company like yours for 6 years, and you get them and you're like, wait, what were you doing at this company? You were doing the service? It's like, you don't know anything. And so even when you think you're hiring experienced people at times, you have to retrain them. And so training is the game. And that's why I go back to the people thing. Training's fine when you're not turning people all the time. But when you're turning them constantly, then the training really becomes frustrating because you're in this perpetual cycle of training, and you feel like it's frustrating to feel like you've wasted all that effort. And that's what the crux of the problem is when labor and getting people is the problem, or the people don't stay. in the and I'm going to come back to the training thing, but one of the ways we've been able to bring some stability to the mowing side of our business is in the United States. We have this program called H-2B visa, and where you can bring people in for 9 months of the year. And it's great when it works, but it doesn't always work. And we're now coming into a period with the new election, like who knows what's going to happen with this program. Some people are optimistic. I'm not as optimistic. And so that's one of the reasons we've been able to stay in the mowing business as much as we have, because we can bring these individuals in, we can train them. They're awesome individuals, first-class people. They came in the country legally. They go home, they come back the next year. They go home, they come back the next year. You can build a business around that. And so, but when you're facing a situation, and not all of our team members are that way, but quite a fair number of them. And when you have to depend solely on a workforce that might stay with you for 3 months, it's almost impossible to build a good business. And so now going back to the past and the fertilization weed control, it is a game of training. And the way I think about that business is something just like what you said. Some things are easy, some things are really hard. And so you have to have a supervisor or a leader that can diagnose that stuff and can train. So one of the experiences I had, so when I got into the business, I thought we should do it all. I had this guy named Elder. He could do irrigation work. He could mow. He could trim the bushes. We got into fertilization weed control. I was contracting the fertilization weed control out to this guy who was a golf course superintendent. Great guy, but he accidentally burned like 15 of our yards and almost killed them all by mixing the tank wrong, even though he knew exactly what he was doing. It's just an accidental mistake. Well, so that was sort of the end of him. Well, when that was the end of him, that meant Jonathan, who is doing, this is before Service All Pipe, I was doing tech consulting. I was part of another business. That meant I was out spraying every morning. It was misery. Every morning I'd spray, and then I'd be up all night long, catching up on my other stuff. And we didn't have the money for me to go hire a really good leader of that business. And so we were in fertilization weed control, like trapped. And it's based on what I know, which, like, let's be real, I didn't know much. So I'm always going, we had a dealer vendor called Lesco in the market back then. I'd go to Lesco and ask Mike, the guy I dealt with, Mike, what should I do? Sometimes Mike would go out to the property and look at the property with me, and I'd slowly learn. That's the slowest way in the whole world to grow a company. It's miserable. I hated the business. I hated everything about it, but I was stuck there because we didn't have the money to go hire a tech. And then we hire a tech. So I hire a guy named Jim. He's mediocre. He came from one of those big national companies, mediocre, but he got me by. And what I realized is I need a leader to run this business. And so it took us a long time to finally get to a place where that part of the business was making enough money. We should never have got into it as early as we did. And I went and hired a leader away from True Green back in the day for $85,000 a year. And suddenly everything got better. Then fast forward a bit, we decided to get into pest control. And, it was just slow and arduous. And the thing I learned after getting kicked in the face a couple of times is when it's time to add a new service offering that has complication in it, like pest or fertilization weed control or arbor, you don't get into that business till you have enough client base that you can sell some percentage of them into that service, and you have enough money in the bank to have a pad where I don't go hire Jim the tech. I go hire Jim, the dude that was running that department at True Green or whatever the name of the company is. I go get the guy that can do all the training, can do the spraying, can talk to the clients, can solve the problems, can buy the chemical, etc. And that's the only way I will ever get into another service offering or another service line ever again. I've just learned it's just too dang painful otherwise. So you're better off limiting your service offering, build. That's why I do love mowing for lots of reasons. Mowing is this great service that you can build a big base of clients. It's the single easiest thing to sell. And then you sell them all this other stuff. And so I think it's a great launching point. It just has so much pain associated to it. I wish the labor problem was better, because I would love to have a lawn mowing business with 10,000, 20,000 clients. I just need the labor problem because it's so good in so many ways.
Yes.
But Yeah. So anyway, my point there was just one, and hopefully it's a value to those listening. One of the great lessons I've learned is like, don't jump to the next service too quick. Jump when you have the money to go get the person that can really help you run the thing. It will save you 2 years of your life and 2 years of misery.
What do you think is a healthy profit margin? Because I think what happens is a lot of people, they start out, they're paying themselves, they're not actually working out what their true profit margin is, assuming that they pay a wage themselves and work out all that sort of stuff. Then they hire people guessing on that number, and then they guess, what should I be aiming for? I don't know what I should be aiming for. I might know my expenses, and so then their pricing is off, and then they get to that difficult season, the winter, even for us, even harder for you though, and they've got no money. What do you do? And that's a real challenge. So as someone who's got this business experience, too much, you're not going to lose, you're not going to win any clients. Not enough, you're going to regret it. So where do you think people should be?
Yeah, there's a lot here. First on the profit. The profit's a little, I'm going to answer it, but it's a little difficult to answer because depending on the structure and size of your business, you would potentially have a different profit margin. I'll give you an example. If you build a $450,000 a year gross revenue business and it's pretty much you, and you don't really have, like maybe you have a part-time office person, you don't have a salesperson, you don't have an operations person, your profit margin should be pretty high because you have very little overhead cost. And so, and now for most people with a $450,000 business, that's not the case because they're in a building phase and they're in a figuring it out phase. But if you have sort of settled out, I'm not going to build this thing bigger than 450,000. I'm only going to take the best customers. I'm going to price at the top of the market. And you've really optimized this thing over time. You should have a really big profit margin. But even then it's like, okay, well, what's the profit margin? Well, that depends on what your salary is. The guy that's taking a $50,000 salary has a much bigger profit margin than the guy that's taking $80,000. Because when I think in terms of profit margin, that doesn't count your salary. You take your salary out, what's left over is profit margin. So this is where it gets really complicated because everybody's doing this a little bit different. What's everybody's salary? How optimized is there, in this example, $450,000 business? Or is this $450,000 business purely in a growth phase and it's just a stepping stone to $1 million as fast as I can get there? You're probably not going to have a lot of profits, to be frank. Or they're all getting consumed by marketing and buying more equipment, things like that. Once you start to get into the millions of dollars and you stabilize the business, I feel the number's 20%. That's my target. I would like it to be bigger. It has been bigger at times. It's been as low as 15%. It's been 17%. It's been all over the board depending on the challenges. But 20 for me is the target number. I know people that are in some of the chemical side, like some of the trades that have higher or lower COGS, like pest control. And some of these individuals are running multi-million dollar businesses at 25%. I've heard of some at 30. That's pretty rare, but many at 25. So it also depends on what the service offering is. I don't know that it's possible for us to be as big as we are and make 20% profit on mowing. I think it's more like a 15% net business now. And that is really being hardcore about running it very, very efficiently and streamlined. And what makes up for that in our business would be fertilization, weed control, and pest control, and arbor, some of the more profitable services. But in any business, my target, and you were touching on something earlier, if you listen to some of these other business individuals that have general business channels, you'll hear all these crazy numbers, like you need to be making 50% profit. You need to have 85% gross margins. Like they do not live in the world we live in. Those are impossible numbers. They just can't, they will not happen. And so in that 20% range, that can be a really good business. And I do want to say it can be higher than that, but most people are not even at 20%. That's for a business scale. Yeah. And so, but that's the number that I know for a fact is achievable. And that's the target. And I have it right here. I don't know if I don't know. I had this out here just recently. Have you ever read this book?
No, I haven't.
Here, I haven't actually even read this whole book. I read the first book, and I have this book sitting out right now because I've been thinking recently I should go reread this book. And the guy that wrote this, his name's Greg Crabtree, And Greg Crabtree, in his first book, which was called, same title, Simple Numbers. Well, it's actually a different title. It's something like Simple Numbers. I don't know, Big Profit, something like that. You'll find it. Just look up Greg Crabtree. He used to give the example of a business that, and I think I should finish my thought. I think it's one of the best accounting finance books I've ever read that simplifies the topic and makes it very understandable for people that do not like the topic. And he had this statement that, and he's seen so many businesses, 10% is getting by and you're at risk. A business only making 10% is a business at risk. And a business making 15% is a good business. A business making 20, 25, 30% is a business, I think I'm reciting this correctly, I read this a long time ago, is a business with tons of competition coming after you, because as soon as the market knows that much profit can be made, there's lots of pressure. And so he used to advocate, as I remember it, and I've had him speak at several of my events and teach my coaching clients. I really, really like this guy. I highly recommend you look him up. He would have been in that 15 plus camp. And from everything I've seen, I think you could do 20, but you got to be really good at operations.
I feel like, let's take a step back to what we were saying before, because we are covering a lot of stuff. The owner operators who don't calculate their profit margin with their own wage accounted for it. People know my story that, I had a health problem and that forced me to make some rapid changes. That's one of the challenges of the industry, is that those things actually happen, and calculating your hourly rate with that profit margin in it, and even charging correctly when you have more flexibility, because you might be like, I'm making plenty of money now, I'm fine, everything's going on well. And then what happens is a family crisis or this, whatever, and you need to hire people, and you realize that, you are not charging enough. Like you work out that you do all your numbers and you're paying yourself roughly what you would, once you include, we have this thing called superannuation, which is like your 401k thing, I think.
Oh, okay.
So we have
type thing.
We have to pay our employees 11.5%. Anyways, our software does it for us, but we have to pay them 11% more than their wages to their superannuation.
So
and
that's
it's like
similar to what we call payroll tax. 401k is a retirement plan, but payroll tax is what we pay into the government.
Oh no, yeah. So this goes to the employee, but they can't touch it until they retire. Yeah. So it's actually, so if you look at it, Australians are on average incredibly wealthy, as an average, but it's all in their superannuation. So it's forced. If the government is forcing people to save, so that when they retire, the government doesn't have to pay them a pension. And so what happens is business owners don't pay themselves super. And so they work out that number. And the other thing they don't pay is what we call workers' compensation insurance, which I think you guys have the same thing. Yeah. So you can get like personal insurance, to cover yourself as a business owner. So they basically, that runs at about 5%, depends on the business, maybe up to 10 if you're doing really dangerous stuff. But let's round it to 15 for easy math, right? If you're paying yourself a certain amount, you think I'm doing really well. Well, you take 15% off that and you go, that's about what an employee would earn. Well, you go, actually, no, you're earning the same, because you would have to pay 5% for workers' comp and a 10 issue for superannuation. And then what happens is you have a problem, it goes downhill, you're not charging for that, and then you don't have the capacity to even run the business anymore. And and this is my problem. I'd been running a business for 6 years at that stage, I think. And I was like, I don't have experience anywhere else. Like I started my business at 19. I was 26, 27. And that's all I'd done. And it's like, I really need to start thinking about this a little bit more. And I was probably on the, to be fair, I was actually thinking about it deeper than a lot of other people I knew in the industry, and I still wasn't prepared. So, yeah, so it's an interesting, I can't encourage people enough to work out these numbers and to work out what their profit is, even if you don't want to grow. Do you have any thoughts on that?
100% agreement. I just so agree. I think not getting your pricing right leads to not being able to pay yourself right. And it just becomes this giant trap that, going back to the beginning of the conversation, how do you get out from under that? It's scary to raise the prices. Most people don't get out from under it because they live in fear, as you alluded to, of raising the pricing because they're afraid it'll destroy the business. And then when they slowly, this is what I've witnessed, having done Service Autopilot, having done the coaching, having helped so many people, having friends that are consultants that I hear the stories, and the credit card debt starts to build. They get a loan against their house. They have a line of credit. The trucks are all financed. It just builds. And then one day they get these high interest, insane loans that, I don't know if you guys have this insanity in Australia, but it just feels criminal in the United States that these options exist. And they get these high loans that they can never pay back with like high interest rate loans. And that's the beginning of the end. And then one day they wake up and they have no business and they are bankrupt, or they have massive amounts of debt. And the root problem all goes back to a variety of things: not charging enough, not paying yourself enough, not paying your team members in the US payroll taxes, or paying into the system like you're supposed to. And we have sales tax in the United States. I've been to Australia. I'm sure you had it too. I just can't remember what the numbers are. But sales tax, they don't pay their sales taxes. They don't collect them. And then one day they have to pay all that stuff. There's just a variety of these very same decisions where we didn't get cross all the T's and dot all the I's, as they would say. You didn't get all that stuff right. And one day you have this realization, and how can you even know? For most people, you don't even know what you don't know in the beginning. And so you just fix stuff. And so you're fixing stuff as fast as you can. But one day you wake up and you're like, oh, I got this problem. And you kick that ball down the road another year, and then another year. And then one day you got $1 million business, but you've got these systemic problems that are almost unfixable. Or in some cases, if you fix them, you're going to now show up on the radar with the government as, for all these years, you've actually never been paying those bills and doing those things. Like, do I even want to now show up on the radar? And these are the things that keep people from ever having good businesses. And so my encouragement here is, as soon as you find this stuff, you gotta fix it. You just can't kick it down the road. Most people kick it down the road, and I almost never see it go well in the long term. Almost never. And so just fix it and know that, crap, I wasted some money. Crap, I made some mistakes, but I'm going to be in this game for the long term. And if I do this thing right, it's going to make me a ton of money. And I will look back and it'll be like a non-issue. Even though it feels horrendous now, you eventually just got to fix it. And I just do it. Easier said than done, but just do it.
I hope I was clear in this segment. I'm talking about a business at scale when I talk about a profit margin of 20%. You've probably heard of some individual that says, oh, I make 40% profit margins in my business. I assure you, they are not running a $2 million or $10 million or $20 million business. Microsoft makes low 30% profit margins as one of the single greatest companies that has ever existed in the world. Somebody with a little business where they're not counting their salary, they have a couple trucks, they don't have an office person, they don't have an office, they don't have an operations manager, they have almost no overhead. Yes, their profit margins are going to look really good. But let's be honest, how much money are we talking about? 80 grand, 100 grand, 150 grand? Okay, that's not millions of dollars a year in profit. So in this, when I was talking about 20% profit margins, I'm talking about you're scaling up a business. You have a real business, office, leadership team, people, all the overhead you'd need to have a really great business that builds wealth for you. These really small businesses, which are perfectly fine and awesome, when you hear these high profit margins, the only thing those businesses have going for them is the income made by the person producing the work. They're not going to be sellable. They're not wealth creation events, and that's totally fine. But I just want to be clear that if you're hearing numbers like 40%, most of the time 30%, 50% profit margins, these are not real profit margins that you will experience in your business as it gets bigger. So let's wrap up talking about my experience taking a 3-year sabbatical. It was an incredible experience. I'm thankful I got to do it. I talk about what I'm working on now and what I'm going to work on next.
You had a sabbatical, and that is so rare. I don't know many people who do that. So you
I don't know
had
anybody.
this.
I don't personally know anybody that's ever done it.
I've heard of people doing it, but
Yeah,
usually
me
the people
too.
I've heard of doing it are usually like, pastors or people like that, and there's a spiritual reason as to why they're doing it. But business owners usually go from one
That's what
project. Yeah, they have 2 months off. And so did it take a lot of discipline to not jump on the probably 60,000 ideas you had in, those, it was 3 years off, something like that?
Yes. Yeah,
and what did you learn on your sabbatical?
It did take, it was difficult. In a couple ways, it was difficult. I felt like I was missing out on a lot of opportunities. And because there's just so many people wanted me to do a deal with them, or maybe want me to partner with them, or I have ideas. And then especially when AI became a thing, it's like, oh my gosh, this is the single greatest time to go build a new business. So, that was out there for me. So that I did find that difficult, but I got over it. One of the big things I learned was that when you're traveling all the time and you're not eating very good because you're traveling to all the cool places and you want to eat all the food and drink all the drinks and do all the stuff, it's not really great for being in shape and healthy. And then you wonder, like, why do I not feel as good? Like, what's wrong with me? Is something wrong? And it's like, that was one of the things where I just think about having this discipline and this routine on a daily basis, like where you're trying to focus on something and build it, and you're trying to be healthy and do all the things. That routine is really valuable. Losing all that routine and just being able to like do anything you want, not have any accountability per se, that there's some real value in life to having structure and routine that I lost. That I appreciate having that experience, but it's not all net positives. I can see why so many people that retire become a shell of the person they used to be. And I know of a guy that's like crazy, crazy wealthy, and he sits at his house in Mexico and drinks all the time because that's what there is to do in Mexico on a golf course. And it's like, or I can list other people, they go and they live in a ski town, and it's never ending people coming to hang out with you in the ski town. And what do you do every time somebody comes to hang out? You go to town and drink all the time. And it's just like, so there's lots of little negatives like that. That was one of my learnings, but I don't want to make it sound negative. It was awesome. But like, that was just something that if you ask me in 10 years, that's still going to be one of the things I learned is like, I think that if I was doing it all over again, I would try to be hardcore about having more structure from a health and exercise and things like that in my life. And traveling does make some of that difficult.
So what was the motivation to take 3 years off? Was it forced because of anything health-wise, or was it a philosophy that you had?
I thought that it was a couple things. One, I didn't necessarily set out for it to be 3 years. I had intended for it to be some amount of time, maybe a couple years. But there was some point along the way where I got the feeling from my wife that 3 years would be better. And like, maybe I should keep staying on the sabbatical. One time she told me I wasn't much more present, even though I was, on break. And so, that was sort of a realization that, hey, I probably extend this. And then we got into this traveling and we were enjoying it. And we were seeing a bunch of places that we hadn't been able to get to before because we wanted to stay in these places for a long time. Like your part of the world, we were in New Zealand for 5 weeks. We were in Australia for 2, those were trips that were very hard for me to do with little kids. I couldn't take them on those trips for that long. So we started checking off a bunch of these boxes of places we just hadn't yet made it to. And we loved it. And so I wanted to keep doing it. And so that helped extend it. The reason I wanted to do it is I just thought it was a really cool way to live life. Like when I sold the business, I was trying to figure out what to do next. And everybody goes and does the same thing. They go build another thing similar to what they had done. And they all jump into it really quick. I just universally see this. And I was like, hey, I have this moment in time. The other stuff I have is taken care of by other people. I don't have to run it. I can do anything I want. What would be a really cool, different thing to do that most people don't do? And I thought a sabbatical would be that thing. And I also had the idea because a number of years earlier, so John and I had never intended to sell the business. We both wanted to live in Colorado. And there was a time where we had talked about starting an office in Boulder or in the Denver area just so we could get to Colorado. Basically, like, could we start an office here? And even at one point when we were in Colorado one time, we went and looked, not John and I, but my wife and I, we looked in around the Boulder area, like, would we like to live here? Because I wanted to have a second location there. And kind of when we were having that, John and I were having that conversation, we also talked about this idea, well, like maybe we could eventually build 1 or 2 month sabbaticals into the business where we would take these breaks from the business. So I'd had the idea a little bit earlier. And so then when we had the sell, I'm like, I was just trying to figure out what to do. And I thought this would be an epic thing that, you know, I wanted to give it a try and see how it went.
So where did you go when you were in Australia?
We went to the Daintree Forest. We went to Lizard Island and the Great Barrier Reef and Sydney. We spent our 2 weeks across those 3 places.
Yeah. And what
we really saw very little, frankly. I mean, it's just, you know, massive country that we were, it was just, you know, we just focused in that one area.
Yeah. People don't really realize how big and empty Australia is. Because you would have, because you're in Dallas, right? Well, that sort of area?
In the Dallas area, yes. Yep.
How many people are in the Dallas area? Just Dallas, sort of, you know, and surrounding.
Well, what they call the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, which is just this big 7 million people.
Yeah, so 4 of those, and that's our entire country. You know, like we got 26 or 27, and we are not that much smaller than America in terms of land area, you know. So, but, you know, anyway, so you can, the natural beauty and all the little things that, you know, you can do is so far away from each other. It's just lots of driving or it's lots of flying. And
that's what I
even
learned.
The Great Barrier Reef is like almost in the middle of nowhere, you know, like you've got to, it's huge. It depends which part you go to, but you know, it's not, so, you could have come back for your next 3 year sabbatical. You could probably just spend the whole thing in Australia and you probably still wouldn't see everything, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to wait till I take another sabbatical to get there. That's one of the goals of the kind of the rest of my career is to have a little bit more freedom in my career where if somebody's like, hey, you want to go to New York, or hey, if my wife wants to go do a trip and I want to do these trips, we go do them. I will say that once I get back into work mode though, I find it really hard to live that way. I can tell myself this story around, hey, I just want to be completely flexible and go do everything. But once I try to get focused, there's a to-do list in my head. I got to move the ball forward, and I find that difficult, but I want to keep as much of that in my life for the rest of my life. So all of that to say, I'm not waiting until another sabbatical to come back to your part of the world.
When you look at there's certain personality types who, and we're all different, and we need each other as different people, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm the type of person, I would sense that you'd be the same too, where I actually like working. And
I do too.
It's like, it depends on the job, right? Like we talked about those procrastinating things before. But if you find something that's in your wheelhouse, like I say this to people, like I miss actually doing gardening. Like there's other things I can do that are higher value, but I like cutting hedges and I like mowing lawns. And what I really love is doing programs where you do some services and you come back in a week or two and things are getting better and you keep doing that and you've got these amazing like I really like that. And I don't feel like running the businesses and doing the things that I do. I love these conversations. This is fun, you know. Like you find that on paper, you know, you're doing 70 to 90 hours of work a week, but you like it and it's fun. And if you're getting your 8 hours of sleep, you know, you can do, people don't realize this, you can do 90 hours a week roughly, get 8 hours of sleep and have a day off, right? And if you like it, you know, it's fun. Now, like I wouldn't recommend that, you know, because there's this concept called family and children, and they probably, you know, it's this vague thing up in the distance.
They kind of mess everything up.
Yeah, exactly. But But like if I was single, like that's just what I would do. But I like what I do, and so I can. So a little bit more stuff for us. When were you over in Australia? What time
I was in
it?
Australia in February of last year.
Okay. So we did a trip. So we did a podcast tour, and obviously it's a very small niche podcast. So we did live events, and we drove from Perth to Adelaide, then to Melbourne, and then up to Brisbane, and then back all the way to Perth as a family. And we did this. It was my wife. My wife always wanted to do it, and I was like,
okay.
"Well, we want to do this holiday." It took 2 months, and I was like, well, if we do it as a podcast tour and we get some brands involved, we can sort of like break even on it, it doesn't have to be profitable, but so I did that, and that was perfect for me because it was like 3 days off, 4 days off, but then I've got something I'm doing as well. That's fun, but it didn't feel like work. But I've had times where I've taken a month off, and I try and take a month off, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything, and I just watch YouTube videos the whole time. I just because you can't go on holiday and so I feel like the big picture, I'm waffling here. The big picture is like there's a certain point where you're not really resting anymore, at least for me, because the thing I actually like doing, I'm not doing.
I got a couple of thoughts on this. One of the things I never thought I was going to be done. My wife would say I was retired to people. I was like, I hated the sound of that language. Not retired, just taking a break. And so I never thought I was going to be done.
Retirement. Yeah.
And the very beginning of taking the break was really difficult for me. I struggled with feeling like I wasn't making any progress. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it wasn't great. Then I got to a place where I have a bunch of hobbies like riding dirt bikes and racing cars and stuff like that. And then we were doing the traveling. And so it felt pretty good. I got to this place where I was like, oh, I could do this long-term. And then I got really bored. I don't know how I would have done 3 years if we hadn't traveled so extensively. I had something to do. And then also when we were back in town, I did waste a lot of time. I probably watched more TV movies during the 3 years than I've watched in a decade before or more. So there's but I was letting myself do that stuff. I did stuff around my property, like trimming trees and picking up branches, like stuff I would not normally do. I did all kinds of stuff that wasn't the best use of time, but it didn't matter. I was on a break, but I could not possibly find enough stuff to make me happy for the rest of my life not working. And I could not fill the rest of my life with just travel. I feel like in this amount of time, I've loved the travel. We want to keep traveling, but I don't want to keep doing it to this level. I need to be, and this is what I hear you saying, and this is how I think a lot of us are wired. We need to feel like we're moving something forward, that we're accomplishing goals, that we're making forward progress, that we're growing, that we're doing something positive. And I think that's how you actually live a good life. And I think that's actually how you stay alive for a long time. The data is actually really bad on retiring. Like if you retire, the death rate is really bad. And so I think if you get to a place in life where you have optionality, then the ideal is kind of what you were talking about with that trip. Like how can you dial back the work to a more reasonable amount and stay engaged, but yet still be able to do the trips, still be able to do the hobbies, do all these other things. Like that's how I think you want to live the rest of your life. That's what I learned. And I think I suspected that, but after taking the sabbatical, I am 100% certain that's the only way I can do it. So, it made me think of something real fast. I think one of the reasons why a lot of entrepreneurs jack up their companies is they get to a place where I've seen this with friends. This is why I'm saying this. So it's not a sabbatical. They get to this place where they've got all these people that can do most of the stuff, and now they don't know what to do. Like, what do I do? People are doing it. So they get in there and they just jack around with their business. They're like dabbling and messing with stuff and like, oh, we need to start this new service line, or we should start this new business. We should buy this business. They got 90 ideas because that's what they do. They need to take all their focus and quit thinking about that business and let people run that. They need to go put their focus into something completely different. And so I just have seen this now. It's kind of this random thing. Like that's what we do as entrepreneurs. That's why a sabbatical or being retired the rest of your life is hard. We've got this energy. We've got to go create. And I use that business as an example. Like when we get freed up, we just find new things to occupy our time. That's how we're made.
Yes.
And I don't believe you can just one day shut it all off and say, all those business conversations were stimulating, all that stuff I had to learn. That was frustrating but stimulating, but I don't need any of that anymore in my life. I'll be totally cool just going to the parties and talking to people about world events and entertainment and the latest movie. There's no way most people I know can live in that world. They will die an early death.
What's next? What's next for you now that you're off your sabbatical? I don't think it's contemporary dance routine choreography.
I can assure you it's not that.
What is coming to mind now? What are you thinking of doing?
Well, right now I am every day spending my time on City Turf. So I'm not taking the business back over. I'm just helping. I'm not involved in the daily operations. What I'm doing right now is helping to build an in-house marketing team and really ramp up sales and marketing to go faster. And next, I'm going to help build a recruiting team. And I will help in there's a couple other initiatives I'd like to help with, but I want to really move those forward. And so every single day, that's what I'm working on. That's like the heads down number one priority. I'm on the side doing a little bit for 5 for 50. I do actually want to ramp that up. I've got quite a bit of content I want to create, which are these roadmaps to guide people through building their business. And it's really mainly just a passion project, something I want to do. And so I am doing that. Like, for example, today I recorded 2 videos, and that takes a little bit of time. I'm putting more thought into some of the videos than I did back in the Lawn Care Millionaire days. And, but I want to ramp that up more, but I'm trying to put most of my focus into City Turf. I've looked at a number of other deals to invest in where I'd participate, and I have just, even though some of them have been very interesting, I've ultimately said no to all of them because I just want to be focused on these things for a bit. My son has a product called EveryChat. It's a software product that I think has real potential, and he's getting some traction on it. And so it's his thing, but when he wants help, I'm helping him with that. And so those are kind of the 3 things I most think about on a daily basis. So that's what I'm focused on. But I thought I was going to build another software company coming. I really wanted to. I love software, but I've decided not to do that. And so once I spend quite a bit of time on City Turf and get 5 for 50 going, then I will reevaluate what's next, but I'm not letting myself do anything else. That was me when I told you about the investment opportunities I was pretty excited about, and I ultimately decided not to do them. That's because I'm trying to take my own advice and be hyper-focused. And my and right now it's on City Turf, and then to a lesser degree, 5 for 50 and Riley, my son's business.
Do you think you could take City Turf into just about every state in America?
Yes,
do you think that's a
100%.
Possible thing? Right. And the limiting factors are you don't have a desire.
Limiting factors have zero desire.
Well, I was just thinking, like, because it's a super challenging thing, and like if you're not interested, there you go. But like, I've thought about like taking our business into other states and having remote staff, because our staff essentially are completely remote. Like we manage everything online, and you would have to have in-person meetings at certain points, but it's something that I've considered doing. But the challenges are just immense, and you just go, would you even make money off it? Because
you could. I'm not negative on it. I've thought about this a lot. If the only thing that I was doing was this business, then I would want to grow it very significantly. And that would ultimately lead to going into other states. I would go through the southeast of the United States, kind of picture kind of Texas east. And if I don't know, well, forget it. Your audience isn't going to have any reason to picture all the states of the United States.
I know where Florida is. That's all. That's all. We've got Texas, we got Florida.
Texas over to Florida, just Texas.
I know where,
east of Florida, kind of in that area. I would
New York
California,
and Seattle. Other than that, I'm done. All right.
And I actually wouldn't take it to any of those markets. Those are, in my opinion, not as ideal of markets. Anyway, if this is all I was doing, I would want to go pretty big with it. But I just have all these other interests. So there's other things that I plan to do. I'm just trying to stay focused right now. I didn't think I was going to do it again, but I'm more and more coming around to doing coaching again. Of all the things I've ever done, I think it's the thing that I most enjoyed. And I've got this nagging thing in the back of my mind that I can't get rid of, where I want to help 15 to 23-year-olds who want to be entrepreneurs build their thing. And so I'm probably heading that direction. But for the moment, I'm focused on these other things. I also am highly interested in acquiring a bunch of service companies, like not in different trades, and just building them and having a portfolio of companies that I own long-term and don't sell any of them. I'm very fond of home services, and I'm very fond of the future of home services for a lot of reasons. So I have plenty of things I could rattle off that I might do, but I gave you initially the list of the only things I'm allowing myself to think about right now.
Yeah, I see. And
so I'm going to do more. I'm just not letting myself do it yet.